Fox 8 News presents Weathering the Storm 2014. Sponsored in part by Jefferson Financial Credit Union and Egan Insurance. Now, your host, Fox 8 Chief Meteorologist Bob Breck.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. Every year here at Fox 8, we do our best to get you ready for another hurricane season. Now, this will be my 37th here at Channel 8. Now, last year, despite 13 named storms, the United States got a break. Not one hurricane made landfall. Now, this creates a challenge for officials along with forecasters. And that's because the public, you, might be lulled into a false sense of security. However, most of us know here along the Gulf Coast the fallout from taking a direct hit. The purpose of weathering the storm has never been to scare you. We simply want to help you prepare for any type of threat. Now, by now, your family should be close to finalizing a plan of action. In other words, do you stay or do you leave? The two choices. The National Hurricane Center has something to add this year. It wants to make you aware of a new approach when it comes to understanding the danger from storm surge. This ties into the confusion Hurricane Isaac caused 2 years ago. I'll explain later with help from my colleague, Nicandra Norwood. Also coming up, Nicandra will demonstrate what some call a real breakthrough in food storage. Now, see if it means a tasty alternative to those canned goods. Bruce Katz will have an update from the hurricane experts who seem to believe we're in for a slow season. Weathering the storm also gets you up to speed on the regional evacuation plan. Look for that later, coming up from meteorologist Chris Franklin. First, we now have one of the best systems in the country when it comes to storm protection. I'm referring, of course, to the beefed up flood walls, the pumps, the gates, and much more. Now, these will take the bite out of the next Katrina, and to some degree, even the larger storms. But in the long term, the system faces key challenges, some tied to maintenance. On top of that, some experts say 100-year protection is just not good enough. We learn more now from John Snell.
From the air, surge gates in New Orleans East almost look like models. There is nothing toy-like about the giant new features at the Intracoastal Waterway or the 2-mile-long wall it connects to, America's largest surge barrier. Or on the West Bank, the world's largest drainage pumping station, 133 miles of gates, pumps, walls, and levees to provide 100-year protection.
There is a lot of work still to be done.
On the New Orleans lakefront, work is about 25% complete on 3 permanent pumping stations designed to eliminate one of New Orleans' weakest links pre-Katrina. The old system left the front doors wide open. Lake waters invaded the outfall canals. The poorly built flood walls blew to bits. Already, temporary pumps close off the lake, providing an additional layer of support.
The modeling effort that we followed really has led to a much more robust system than Congress really would have envisioned and the Corps would have envisioned prior to Katrina.
In fact, Corps computer modeling shows the new levees would significantly reduce flooding from a 500-year storm, one even larger than Katrina. Areas of dark blue on this map depict pockets of the city 8 feet or more underwater, but some areas have less than 2 feet of water or no water at all. The next step for the Corps, armoring earthen levees with a geotextile fabric, then topping them with grass.
And that'll make the system much more resilient to a 500-year level storm and protect it from potential overtopping.
To design the system, the Corps ran computer models for 152 possible storms. Today in New Orleans East, levees rise up to 25 feet, 10 feet or so higher than pre-Katrina. As impressive as these structures may be, are they enough?
No, it's a minimum daily requirement.
Engineer H.J. Bosworth with the group Levees.org points out most American cities, including others on the Mississippi River, enjoy much higher levels of protection.
They all have 500-year protection and don't even think that's enough.
In reality, Bosworth says not everybody within the new walls enjoys the same security. The main basin of New Orleans, from the lake to the river and the 17th Street Canal to the Industrial Canal, is less vulnerable than St. Bernard, New Orleans East, or even East Jefferson.
That has a lot of defenses. It's insulated from things that could happen in New Orleans East, that could happen in St. Bernard in the lower Ninth Ward.
Doing the math on 100-year storm protection can be chilling. Consider that a child born today and living to, say, the age of 80 would have a better than 50-50 chance of experiencing a major flood from storm surge in his or her lifetime. In the wake of Hurricane Betsy in 1965, the government authorized New Orleans hurricane defenses, but gave us a system in name only.
We have something that is, I think, more honest and reliable, but it's not enough.
But Tulane environmental law expert Mark Davis has serious long-term concerns.
We've given ourselves a second chance. Not many people get that. The real question is now whether we stand behind these 1 in 100-year levees and say mission accomplished, or if we say, you know, we made it into the lifeboat, now let's get to shore.
And Davis argues keeping the system at a 100-year level of protection won't be easy.
The maintenance of this system is going to be left to us as taxpayers. It's not going to be a federal responsibility. But the real burden is just about to land upon us.
Already 3 sections of the new levees in New Orleans East needed early maintenance. One spot near the surge barrier sank 3 to 6 inches below the design, despite extraordinary steps during construction. The Corps used deep mixing of soil, drilling down and pumping cement in order to build the levees higher than otherwise would have been possible. This spring, the Corps raced to restore the levee height.
You know, we are committed to not turning over a levee if it's below design grades.
Engineers say the ground in those spots should sink less in the future. As the land subsides, it compacts and actually grows stronger. But the maintenance responsibility shifts to the local flood authorities soon. Tulane's Mark Davis worries maintenance costs could suck up dollars that would otherwise build coastal projects, restoring or simply protecting areas that once provided natural defense.
And I think that's why we have to be, in the business of explaining to ourselves why you need wetlands, why you need certain levees, and why you need to live smart behind them.
Davis says be careful not to go down the path of believing the levee is your final defense.
That's what we, deluded ourselves into thinking for far too many years. And I think it would be a tragedy if we, went back to that kind of thinking, through what we're willing to invest in.
The new walls surrounding Metro New Orleans rate as engineering marvels, the strongest man-made defenses of any coastal city in America. And to critics, simply not enough. For Weathering the Storm, I'm John Snell.
Engineer H.J. Bosworth with levees.org believes some of the remaining earthen levees in St. Bernard could be strengthened, and the levee in Kenner could use some extra height. Now, that might take a couple of $1 billion, certainly serious money, but Bosworth points out it's a fraction of what the government has already spent. We now examine why this could be a quiet hurricane season. And we're talking, of course, about El Nino versus La Nina. Now, I thought it might be good to give you a little refresher course on how they affect us here along the Gulf Coast. We get that report from meteorologist Bruce Katz.
Well, the year's flying by and the 2014 hurricane season is upon us. And again, depending on worldwide weather systems, that will actually dictate on how strong or how weak our hurricane season will be here in the Gulf Coast region. Now, again, during hurricane season, we always talk about El Nino and La Nina, and let's talk about these systems and what we expect in terms of the actual forecast for the year. First of all, El Nino, that is a good thing. It's returning this year. El Nino is the warming waters of the southern Pacific, and what happens is, as the water begins to warm up, it really forms its own low pressure system and the winds begin to rise. And what happens there? We start seeing a very strong jet stream developing right over the equatorial region, and yes, indeed, right over the area from the Caribbean into the Atlantic and southern Gulf of Mexico, where storms develop. So again, when storms do develop within this region here, normally in the latter part of the season, the Cape Verde season off the Cape Verde Islands, or even earlier in the season coming in from the Gulf and the Caribbean, we've got these very strong winds coming out of the southwest, and certainly that tends to rip this storm apart. Now also, something we're looking at this year, temperatures on the sea surface temperatures below normal, and we know the fuel is very warm water. So if the temperatures are a bit cooler, we may not see as many storms or as strong of storms, and even in the extreme northeastern Atlantic Ocean, temperatures are cooler as well. So we have a couple of things on our side this year. Now, what we don't want to see is La Nina. La Nina is the cooling of the waters, and as a result, we don't see the big shearing going on. Remember, with El Nino, we have the very strong winds coming in over the equatorial region and also the area where hurricanes would form. But with a La Nina, jet streams well removed to the north, we've got cooler and wetter than normal areas within the country. And on top of that, we do have more storms during a La Nina. So El Nino this year, certainly a good thing. And it looks like it may be strengthening a bit. Now remember, back in 2012, we had the category changes just very slightly. Now a category 1, 74 to 95 miles per hour, no change, and also a category 2, 96 to 110. As we start getting deeper into it, here's that slight change. From 111 to 130, the old Saffir-Simpson scale, now 111 to 129, so that's actually come down just a bit. But you'll notice we've actually gone up a bit from 131 to 155 on a Category 5 to 130 to 156. So again, storms have been a little bit stronger. As a result, these have been revised just a bit upward, and then even further, you may have a Category 5 with winds of 157 or greater, so certainly on the tail end of those, we have higher wind speeds. Now, hurricane season is here, and several things that you need to do are certainly be prepared, be alert, evacuate, and review your evacuation plan because, of course, you have special needs possibly, you have a lot of prescription and medications going on. So again, now's the time for the beginning part of the season to start preparing in the event that you have to evacuate, and certainly you want to have all the necessary needs if you're going to be away from home for a long period of time. So of course, coming up in just a little bit, we talked about El Nino, La Nina, and the system. We're going to talk about the actual predictions for the 2014 season. All that more coming up in just a few minutes.
Now, all too often, forecasters fail to get people to realize the danger of storm surge. A smaller, slower storm, or one that makes landfall hundreds of miles away, can still have a tremendous impact. Now, some examples include Rita, Ike, and most recently, Isaac. A few years ago, the National Hurricane Center separated surge from the Saffir-Simpson scale. However, most people still make the mistake of only looking at the category. For example, as they try to decide how to react, they'll say, "Oh, it's only a 1. Mistake. This year, the agency will make a giant leap forward. There's something new that can help educate the public about the real threat from flooding. Here's meteorologist Nikandra Norwood.
Wind is a major player in hurricane damage. The immediate visual destruction of flying roofs and the strength expressed by wind forcing massive trees to bend are dramatic images, but most often, it's the sudden rise of water that kills and creates widespread, massive devastation.
It stayed over one place, and that's what the water came in all of a sudden.
I didn't know where the water came from, and it was a big surge.
And I was like, geez, that was way worse than we thought it would be.
This is what Indigo Lakes and Palmetto subdivisions in Laplace looked like as soon as Isaac's winds calmed down enough for a plane to fly overhead and survey the damage.
I've been living in this area over 40-something years. Like I said, my mom and them used to live on Maidenwood. We lived out here 11 years, and we have never gotten flooded like it was for Hurricane Isaac.
Brian Trant lived in Laplace all his life, knowing that Lake Pontchartrain storm surge was possible.
Any storm that comes across that lake right there, we're going to flood. We're going to flood no matter what, until they get a levee.
A recent triple bypass surgery would keep Trant from leaving.
And right before the hurricane hit, I had to go back to the infectious disease doctor.
With Isaac a Category 1 storm offshore, he hoped for the best.
We didn't think it was going to get in the house.
But he knew the worst was possible.
The storm predicted to move over the lake and stall. And I said, well, if it does that, that's the worst case scenario for our area.
We had about 1.5 feet of water.
Victoria McCarson was enjoying her freshman year at Southeastern.
I stayed in Hammond because I thought that like a Category 1 storm wouldn't be that bad.
But that free time from school quickly turned to concern for her family's lives.
Next thing I knew, like the morning of, my mom was calling me, telling me there was water in the kitchen.
An uncle and young cousin took rescue boats out of the neighborhood.
The boat came, the people came and took them, and they ended up in Alexandria.
The young woman learned a hard lesson.
We were all shocked. I mean, all of our family members too were shocked. Because like I said, for other hurricanes, usually I have family that lives in Metairie, and they come here to, like, I guess because people figure it could be worse there, but I was like, oh, it could happen here too.
You just do like that.
Not far away, what Roel Nieves sees today
I love gardening.
is a far cry from 2012.
It was very, very sad. It was a rush of water, and it was already waist deep when I rode the boat.
It was a struggle for him to leave.
Which says, Mr. Nieve, you're the last one to be rescued. Are you coming or are you staying home? I was crying.
As he realized Isaac was a threat,
I have to save all the things that I should save, you know, the books, the photographs, the mementos of the home. We have a stuffed animal here, my cat. His name is Morris.
so much that had already been lost once.
Really, the storm was not really a dramatic one because in the morning it was just like a little rain, but the wind was substantial. It was quite whoo, 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 like that. But I never thought all of a sudden the water surged around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
11 years we've been living here, we have never seen water like that.
It's just not expected because we've never had flooding or anything out here before.
The National Hurricane Center believes this new warning system will change that perception. New inundation maps will be paired with the hurricane advisories this season. The goal is to help show people the true threat of storm surge flooding in their neighborhood.
This is specifically directed at telling people what the water effects would be in their given neighborhood or given piece of geography.
St. Charles Parish Emergency Preparedness Director Ron Perry sees great things from this entirely new approach in helping people understand the real danger.
I think that Saffir-Simpson focused so specifically on wind effects that people got tracked in and trained in on just listening to Saffir-Simpson, where in fact, water is the thing that is going to cause the most damage or the most loss of life.
Jefferson Parish Emergency Management Director Charles Hudson sees the new map system as a major step for the region.
And not a direct impact storm may affect us more than a direct impact storm, depending on the strength, how fast it's moving, the wind capacity, how wide the storm is. It's all going to bring them information and us to make those decisions.
With Lake Pontchartrain being connected to the deep waters of the Gulf of Mexico, storm surge is an issue much farther inland than in many other places, making this new storm surge warning a big tool for our area.
Hopefully they take this information and use it to their advantage.
Hudson thinks the tool will lead people to make earlier decisions to evacuate and be more secure with their decision.
They'll see that information themselves and be able to judge themselves. And with us making the warnings and asking them to leave, them seeing the information, hopefully they'll make the best decision.
A couple years ago, the lake's overflow eventually stretched across I-10 all the way to the Mississippi River levee in many parts of St. John Parish. The new maps would have warned of such a scenario.
Out in the street, it was up to like waist deep.
Trent is looking forward to the new insight.
I think that's a good idea, for them to come up with a map like that. We need more information.
We've never really had anything like that before, so I think that'll be really beneficial for all of us here.
It is just a good thing that, Robotham, our parish president, will have that insight, because it's very, very important to have a warning before, a major hurricane.
Unlike slosh models that require special training and calculations to decipher, these maps are made for the public to easily understand.
And this map, for example, has a number of colors from red, orange, yellow, and blue. Red indicating extreme flooding in areas, and then orange high, yellow moderate, and blue the lowest effect, but still having water standing in an area.
A major hurdle in communication.
We're lucky to still have our house, because in Katrina, they had 6 feet of water in some people's houses. We was lucky just to get 1.5 feet. But it looked like a war zone around here.
They may not prevent the physical destruction, but the color-coded surge maps could end up saving lives and get homeowners ready for what they will find on their return. For Weathering the Storm, I'm meteorologist Nakandra Norwood.
The maps will be released 6 hours after storm advisories. In 2015, the National Hurricane Center will begin to issue separate storm surge warnings. Coming up, I talk with a member of the team at the National Hurricane Center to explain the science behind the new storm surge alerts. If a major threat leads to a full-scale evacuation this year, better be sure of the best way to reach your destination. Chris Franklin will share some words of wisdom from state police coming up next. Those of us in the business of forecasting do understand lots of you really dread June 1st. You worry this might be the year we face another full-scale evacuation. Now, images immediately come to mind of gridlock, running out of gas, or worse, where's the nearest potty? State police and others want you to realize if you just do a little homework now, it can save you a lot of trouble down the road. Meteorologist Chris Franklin has that.
If the mayor said evacuate, I will evacuate. Katrina told me that.
And so you would not, no matter what the category of the storm, you would hang here?
Yeah.
Well, my parents did live in Chalmette, and they lost everything, so I wouldn't think twice about leaving.
To stay or go, it's perhaps the toughest question you face when a storm threatens. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. The key is to plan now for many different scenarios. If it's a weak, fast-moving storm and you have the right supplies and a generator, it could make more sense to shelter in place.
You need to make a decision that's going to keep your family safe. That's going to be your number one priority. So you need to secure your home, secure everything outside so it doesn't blow around and cause damage to anybody else's homes.
Your disaster plan will depend on the strength, speed, and direction of a storm, and more. Other factors include whether or not you live inside the hurricane protection system. Also, if you have a family member who's very young, very old, or disabled, leaving will be a smart move in most cases. But if you do stick around, are you willing to gamble on days or even weeks with no power?
Even if it wasn't a major storm, just being without electricity for 2 days is miserable enough in the summer heat, so I would think twice about it.
You could still lose power for multiple days. You may still be stuck inside. It's most likely going to be hot. So make sure that you have the water and the necessities that you need.
Many likely remember what happened nearly 2 years ago during Isaac. Storm surge flooded I-10 near LaPlace, making that route impassable. Recent improvements should help the roadway remain high and dry next time. Still, state police call it a potential trouble spot during a major storm.
That is a low-lying area, and that's something that we keep very close eye on. So if the water does start to rise, we will shut down that section of the interstate, and that's for public safety. We don't want anybody stuck in that water.
State police cannot stress enough the importance of evacuating long before contraflow is ever ordered.
Contraflow is not a fun experience for people when they find themselves on the interstate for hours at a time. Also, depending on where they get on the interstate, they may find themselves going to Jackson when they actually wanted to go to Baton Rouge.
Louisiana State Police's Melissa Mady wants you to get familiar with contraflow maps even before the first named storm. For some, a smarter option is taking a state highway to completely avoid the interstate altogether.
Contraflow only affects the interstate system, so it does not affect Airline Highway or any of the other evacuation routes in Louisiana.
Whether you hit the road or hunker down, protecting life and property will depend on the steps you take right now. Don't wait until you're feeling the pressure of a tropical system headed this way. For Weathering the Storm, I'm meteorologist Chris Franklin.
There's a vast but little-known stretch of land within Orleans Parish serving as a natural buffer against storms. Its future, though, is uncertain, and there's a fierce struggle to save it. John Snell will have that story as Weathering the Storm continues.
You're watching Weathering the Storm 2014. Here again is Fox 8 Chief Meteorologist Bob Breck.
A stretch of land that some people never heard of may keep their house from flooding. The Orleans Land Bridge, way out in the east, separates Lake Pontchartrain from Lake Borgne, essentially the Gulf of Mexico. But will it be there in your children's lifetime or later in yours? Here again is John Snell.
On the Wrigley's at the Orleans-St. Tammany Parish line, Fort Pike takes you back in time.
Wrigley's means little ditch.
Maybe so in 1828. Ditch doesn't quite fit now as the land erodes.
Probably almost the size of across the Mississippi River. I mean, it's wide in spot.
As real estate melted away, the Wrigley's swallowed a moat that once surrounded the fort.
It was a good couple of 200 to 300 feet, probably out further back in the early 1800s.
Art Schick, who works at the State Historic Site, sees the inevitable effects of time accelerated by land loss.
This first wall up here closer to us here, it came down about a month and a half ago. On the other side over there, a week ago, that wall came down.
Fort Pike may be the most prominent feature on the Orleans Land Bridge, the sliver of land that hugs Highway 90 from Chef Pass toward the Pearl River.
Basically, that land bridge moderates, reduces the amount of storm surge that comes into Lake Pontchartrain.
Without steps to protect it, scientists say it could be gone by 2050, lost to the same forces chewing away at coastal Louisiana.
The land bridge may not survive if there's no marsh on the other side.
No one has to explain the importance of this feature to Cheryl Kelly or her neighbors in Venetian Isles.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to protect Orleans, Slidell, everything west.
Engineering studies estimate the land bridge knocks down 2 feet of storm surge on the North Shore, 1 foot on the South Shore, and even keeps salt water out of areas far to the west near Hammond and beyond.
The cypress trees in those marshes, they're going to start looking like the trees in Chalmette when they opened up the Mr. Gov.
Once this marsh is totally gone, we're in trouble all around.
The State Coastal Master Plan includes several large projects to protect the land bridge, and scientists who've studied the issue believe it can be saved.
I think as long as we keep that progression of projects on the Orleans Land Bridge, yeah, I think we can maintain them.
This easternmost point in Orleans Parish is well outside the hurricane protection system. Some people would like to change that, but they are running into powerful obstacles. The master plan also includes a loose concept of some levee or barrier running from the Wrigley's to Chef Pass.
All of the whole area encompassing the whole Lake Pontchartrain Basin is going to be saved, along with New Orleans.
That idea draws howls of protest from Mississippians who fear a barrier would drive water their way.
Everything you build in the way of a structural protection is going to move risk onto someone else.
Why don't we do a cooperative effort with Mississippi instead of fighting each other? Come together at the table and let's find solutions for both places.
Supporters argue through a few thousand years of history, Mississippi always took storm surge deflected from Louisiana. Even today, water piles up in the natural V shape of the coast. In one sense, a levee would restore the effects of land that no longer exists.
Not much you can do about the natural occurrence of southeast Louisiana without removing southeast Louisiana, which is hardly advisable.
Even the levee wouldn't be a cure-all. Engineers with the Corps have pointed out in shallow Lake Pontchartrain, surge blocked by a barrier would have plenty of time to kick up again before plowing into places like Laplace. Nationally, the Corps has a backlog of billions of dollars of water projects. Tulane environmental law expert Mark Davis says it's understandable residents are pushing for a levee, but protecting a relatively small population would be a tough sell in Congress.
You've got major metropolitan areas with millions and millions of people that are going to be needing infrastructure investment.
When you think about all the billions of dollars we spend on other countries for aid and stuff, we need to talk about saving ourselves.
Each day, Lake Borgne and the encroaching Gulf take another little bite out of Fort Pike and the last remaining natural defenses that once surrounded it. For Weathering the Storm, I'm John Snell.
As Lake Borgne chews at Fort Pike, The state envisions hundreds of millions of dollars in projects to create marsh in the remaining wetlands between the land bridge and the Gulf. That includes nearly $500 million in dredging projects by the year 2031. Next, when you hear sheltering in place, a wide variety of tasty foods is probably not what comes to mind. See what's helping to change all that as Weathering the Storm continues. Bigger and stronger floodgates and levees have convinced lots of folks they have what it takes to ride out a relatively weak storm. Now, if you're not going to evacuate, you must give serious thought to facing a week or more of no power. And even if you do have a generator, making sure you have enough food and water can be a real challenge. For some, the solution includes a rather creative approach. Here again is meteorologist Nikandra Norwood.
The decision to go out at the height of Isaac
I was just trying to go find somewhere to get some food.
almost cost the Johnson family their lives.
The water, look at our car, oh my God.
That's why having adequate supplies are so important.
As we focus on making sure that we have a year's supply, actually, of food for each member of our household. And these items come in bulk.
Mike Dome and his family are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Having home food storage and a financial reserve are tenets of the LDS Church.
So our focus is trying to help people become prepared for an emergency.
After Katrina, the Bishop Storehouse in Slidell became a center for recovery.
We definitely embraced the community and wanted to help, and so we were doing everything from providing things like hygiene kits to kitchen kits, and we were also providing food as well.
It just makes sense to me to have it. It's another form of insurance that I believe in.
Lois Wright is working at the storehouse as a part of an 18-month mission trip.
We've had dried beans and rice that has stored for a long time, and we'll open it after we've had it for 5 or 6 years and no problem.
Many of the items at the storehouse have an extreme shelf life.
White rice, for example, has a 30-year shelf life. Spaghetti is another one, and these are already in cans or in packaging that would allow that.
The cans are packed with special oxygen absorbers that prevent spoiling, and the tin cans protect against bugs and rodents. Water storage is also a priority.
We store it in like those 2-liter soda bottles. You rinse those out really well. Those will store water. Juice containers. But this food is to give you peace of mind that you can put it away and know you've got food stored.
In a category 1, 2, or 3, outages could last between 7 and 10 days. So we really want customers to think about, how am I going to prepare to be out of power for that amount of time?
Melanie Stewart is the Director of Customer Service with Entergy. She wants customers to know that even in a relatively weak storm, restoring power will take time.
So when those circuits are out, we have to put boots on the ground and get people to look and assess the damage on every single circuit, and then we begin to restore power when it's safe to do so.
That can't happen until it's safe.
Just as our community shelters in place during the brunt of the storm, our employees do the same. Now, as soon as the winds get under 35 miles an hour, then we're out there restoring power, assessing damage.
Assessing what you can live without is a must.
You have to really think about, what are all the things that I depend on when the power's on? You know, what am I going to do to keep my food cool or my medication cool? What am I going to do to try and stay cool myself?
The cell phone has become a necessity, and it could be a life-saving device after a storm, but we need to keep the battery charged. There are a few options for that. There are these rechargeable batteries that will hold about 2 charges usually for most cell phones. Also, you can get a DC converter that will convert the power from your car. You just have to be careful not to drain the car's battery.
It's good to have some food on hand that isn't going to require cooking. I'm thinking of things like tuna.
Dome recommends cooking with a camping stove, but knows some more creative methods.
People can get online and look at these things, they call them rocket stoves, and with just a few twigs, out of a number 10 can, you can make a stove.
The aftermath of a storm may be more uncomfortable than evacuating, But with the right preparation,
really the most important thing is just prepare ahead of time. Anything that you can do now in advance of the storm is something that you don't have to worry about later. And if you do shelter in place and see power lines on the ground, please stay away from them.
Stocking up is the key.
Wouldn't it provide some security to your family and a little bit of a safety net to know that you've got that? And so it's, you know, you think about it, you know, this food is like money in the bank.
Dome makes it clear these supplies are available to everyone, both online and through the storehouse.
We feel like God gave us everything on this earth, and it's a good practice for us to appreciate it and to store it and to have it on hand and be able to help our own families when the need arises.
You can stay safe and save some time and money for weathering the storm. I'm Nakondra Norwood.
Stay with us. More of our special report, Weathering the Storm, right after this. We have some troubling survey results from a group called FLASH. Now that's Federal Alliance for Safe Homes. The example, 84% of Americans mistakenly believe that wind speeds are the key factors behind the decision for an evacuation order. Well, the truth of that is the evacuation zones are based on the threat of storm surge and inland flooding, not a storm's category on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Now, as you often hear me say, storm surge is the greatest threat to life and property. Speaking of property, 69% of Americans think it will cost them more than $10,000 to make their homes safer. That's a mistake. For some, the investment comes to about $1,100. Well worth it. Flash says that's the cost of bracing garage doors, installing plywood shutters, and other steps. Of course, the goal is to protect the envelope of your home against wind damage. Finally, 54% of Americans, and this is hard to believe, would tape up their windows before a storm. Officials have tried hard to let people know that when they do this, it's a waste of preparation time. The tape will not stop a window from breaking, and worse yet, it could keep the glass in larger pieces, deadly missiles. We have now more on the mistake of trying to gauge a hurricane's total threat with a focus only on its category. As history has taught us, the 1 through 5 system can fall short as we try to help the public understand the potential for storm surge. I talked about this recently with some of my colleagues in Orlando at this year's National Hurricane Conference.
Even people who have experienced hurricanes are making mistakes with respect to storm surge. So this new graphic is a new way to communicate the threat in a more straightforward and clear manner. The public will have access via the National Hurricane Center website, hurricanes.gov. They can go and look at the graphic just like you and I.
This year, for the first time, the National Hurricane Center will issue special maps. The goal is to give communities a clearer picture of the kind of storm surge that might be headed their way. The color-coded maps won't be able to pinpoint specific homes or neighborhoods, but still, an area will know how much water will wind up on land.
We're definitely getting better, but one of the worst mistakes I see people making, and they're making it in every part of the coastline, in every storm, is to look back at past storms and say, I did or did not flood. We're calling it a potential storm surge flooding map, or a potential storm surge flooding graphic. That's for 2014. That's the first of a 1-2 punch.
As we mentioned earlier, the Hurricane Center will take the surge predictions a step further in 2015. Now next year, they're going to actually have a system of storm surge warnings. When a forecaster determines the potential for life-threatening surge in a particular area, they'll issue a warning for people there to take action. Next, some of the nation's top forecasters explain how many major hurricanes they expect this year. And also find out if it's the East Coast or the Gulf Coast, where the odds of hurricane landfall appear to be higher. That's coming up. As we told you earlier, some believe we'll get a break as far as major hurricanes this year along the Gulf Coast. You've heard me say in the past, conditions often have to be just right for us to face an active season. Now, according to some experts, those conditions do appear to be coming together in a way that indicates we'll have a quiet summer in fall. The concern, however, is that some people might forget the so-called quiet year of 1992. That was also the year of Category 5 Hurricane Andrew. Here again is meteorologist Bruce Katz.
Well, earlier we talked about the systems, El Nino, La Nina, and also the steering and also the shearing going on. Let's talk about now the setup where we would have either a Gulf storm or an Atlantic storm. So here's what we're looking at in terms of a Gulf setup, where we would see storms coming into the Gulf of Mexico and threatening parts of the Gulf Coast states. High pressure well to the southwest, just off of Bermuda, and as the high is well removed off to the west, the storm's right on the bottom end of the ridge, and then eventually with the curvature of the earth or the Coriolis effect, what we see is eventually as the storms begin to move westward, we get that natural bend. So the bend off to the north, eventually into the Gulf of Mexico, they find a weakness in the ridge, and that's where we could certainly be under the gun for the potential of a hurricane. So we'll talk about predictions in just a moment. Now, scenario, the other one, here's what we're looking at here. High pressure to the east, far removed, and what happens is on the western side of the ridge, since it's so far east, it makes that bend as it moves on the western side of the ridge. As a result, anywhere from South Florida through Georgia into the Carolinas, all the way to the northeast, that weakness in the ridge, well removed to the east, certainly would bring it more northerly and not so much in the Gulf of Mexico, and certainly that would be good news for us. Let's take a look now. One of the information people we use is Weather Bell Analytics, and as we take a look, some of their predictions coming in this year, anywhere from 3 to 6 storms, 2 to 4 hurricanes, 1 or 2 major, and their hotspot for landfall this year would be on the eastern coast, and that would mean that that high is removed to the east of us. That would make the storms a little bit farther to the east of us. As a result, anywhere from the northern states down to Florida, this would be the strike zone that we're looking at for the potential of strong storms. Now, not to say that we're out of the woods, but notice 3 to 6 storms, 1 to 2 hurricanes here, where we're looking at the possibility of double that, 2 to 4 on the East Coast. So certainly this year is going to be one we're going to be watching out for as we get a little bit closer. Now let's take a look at the actual frequency during the months of hurricane season, and you'll notice in June and July you really don't get that many storms. Percentages are very low. Then we get into August, and then into September and October. This is where we ramp up. Remember, on the 29th of August, we had Hurricane Katrina, and the latter part, you're starting to get into the upper 20s to 30 percentile. So again, we really start paying attention getting into August, September, and early October. Also, as we take a look, predictions this year. Good news. The average, normally over the last 30 years, 12 named storms, 7 of those hurricanes, 3 of those major, which is a Category 3 or greater. Well, this year, Dr. William Gray at Colorado State, he is talking about 9 named storms, well below the 12, 7 hurricanes the norm. He's talking 3, which is well below, and then major storms, not 3, but maybe 1. And the major factors coming in, a moderate El Nino, which we talked about, which shears the tops off of the storms as they begin to move westward. On top of that, cooler than average temperatures in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, predictions, we give those to you, but remember, you just can't go on that. Predictions are just one thing, but the actual results are one other thing. So as we take a look at Andrew, remember back in '92, we only had 4 hurricanes, which is half the normal hurricanes we would get. And this storm caused havoc all the way from South Florida into areas of southwest Louisiana, 26 tornadoes, 65 fatalities, over 26 billion in damage. So again, it only takes one storm, even if this year the predictions are lower, in which they are. All it takes is one storm to cause some major issues. So, of course, during the 2014 season, the Fox 8 weather team will be here for you. If anything does develop out there, during our nightly newscast in the mornings as well, we'll be giving you the information. And then, if it's a threat to us at all, we'll be on the air until the last blow. But as of right now, looks like we may see a lower than normal hurricane season, but we can't let our guard down for the potential of, again, the possibility of one storm. That's all it takes to cause a lot of problems.
We also point out that famous team from Colorado State has struggled the past couple of years. Let's look at 2012. We had more than twice as many hurricanes form as they predicted. And it was almost the opposite trend in 2013. Only 2 hurricanes formed after a springtime prediction of 9. Last year, the Colorado State experts failed to anticipate dry desert air blowing across the Atlantic from Africa and its role in suppressing hurricane formation. Coming up next, I'll have my final thoughts on this season ahead and how to make sure you're ready. Welcome back to Weathering the Storm. As we conclude another program, I'm reminded of a key fact. Some of our worst storms hit in otherwise quiet years. I mention that because the predictions for a quiet 2014. Yes, some experts do believe the season will be slow. Still, it's never the total number that matters, it's the location. That's why I ask you to do a few simple things to make your life much easier if and when we have a threat. First, know what to do. You should be able to shelter in place if certain steps were taken. Now, they include installing shutters to keep the wind out, buying a generator to provide power, and getting a second story. You can't stay in a one-story house. You must have a way to go up if a levee is breached. Now, you also need food and water supply to last 7 to 10 days. However, what if you have not or cannot take these precautions? In that case, you must evacuate with the approach of a Category 3 or higher storm. Is evacuation expensive? Absolutely, especially if you have children. However, you can minimize those expenses if you plan ahead. Contact relatives, grandma, grandpa, cousin Bruce, close friends. Ask if they can help with housing. It's the lodging and food costs that quickly add up. Know where you are going and how to get there. Go to our website, review ContraFlow. That way, you don't end up going to Macomb when you wanted to go to Baton Rouge. These are difficult decisions, but I promise you this, my staff and I will provide you with clear, easy to understand graphics and the latest information. We want to help you make the correct decision. Now, for 3.5 decades, you've placed your trust in me. I will continue to work hard to earn that trust as we weather future storms. For the entire Fox 8 family, thanks for watching.
Weathering the Storm 2014 was sponsored in part by Jefferson Financial Credit Union and Egan Insurance. Fox 8 is proudly locally owned.